Thank you. Welcome to Exploring the Metaphysical. It's on this podcast, it's my mission to serve as a conduit for healing and positive transformation and help elevate the consciousness of our global community to higher vibrations. I think that's a lofty goal. By sharing our insights, energy, and inspiration, I hope to guide us all away from negativity and into a space of peace, tranquility, and self-healing. My vision is a world where each of us taps into our innate energetic life force, supporting one another in the journey toward greater awareness, compassion, and harmony. Through this Exploring the Metaphysical podcast series, it is my hope that we can enlighten, awaken, and empower ourselves and each other, creating a ripple of healing and light that touches every corner of our lives. So thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you all. If others come in, I'll be adding them as we go. And I believe that most of you know who our guest is tonight, Miss Annie Blackstone. And I wanted to just read her bio because it's pretty impressive. So Annie Blackstone was first certified as a hypnotherapist in 1992 in Harbin Hot Springs with teacher Sarah Stewart. Annie practiced hypnotherapy, past life regression, Jin Shindo acupressure, and massage in Oakland for 8 years before taking a break to raise her 5 children and founded a nonprofit, Chamfons, in Haiti. What's Chamfons mean?
Sionfons. It's essentially
Annie?
House of God.
Oh, Sionfons, House of God. Sionfons. Thank you. During this time, she became an adoption advocate and a parent educator for people parenting traumatized children. Now she has returned to her calling as a hypnotherapist and energy worker, assisting those on the healing path in finding their way. Annie is the creator and instructor of the HCH Shamanic Practices Certification Program. Her goal is to create a supportive and dynamic community of healers because the world needs us now more than ever. Annie's teaching draws on a variety of cultures, teachers, and traditions, which all stem from an understanding of working in relationship and reciprocity with nature and the unseen forces that shape our world. She has also received advanced training in and utilizes biofield tuning, EFT, past life regression, spirit releasement therapy, sand play therapy, and brain spotting. Annie has her own practice at HCH and is available for private sessions. You can visit Annie online at her website, annieblackstone.com. And with that, welcome, Annie. I think a round of applause is in the background. I can hear it. So, Annie, I first met Annie when I was looking for a Reiki practice teacher or someone to teach me about energy healing. And I took all 3 of the Reiki classes that were offered right away, jumped in. I took several other classes that were offered. I jumped in the soup, as we like to say. And I'm so glad I did. There were other instructors that I met along the way. I always came back to Annie because I was just drawn to what she was teaching. The shamanic practices course is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I just love using what I've learned there. And I believe that my clients benefit greatly from that. One of the things that I did try out with Annie was the offering she did for a session of ancestral healing. And I found it very enlightening and it seemed to help make a difference. But I want her to share with other people because, as I just mentioned to her, you don't always find an offering of ancestral healing, not through HCH. You can on her website, but HCH site doesn't offer that. And I think it's something that really could be beneficial for a lot of people. So we're going to discuss that and see if it might be something that would be a good fit for you possibly, or just something that would add to your knowledge base. So Annie, what is ancestral healing?
Well, I want to say that ancestral medicine or ancestral healing can be approached in a variety of ways, right? So in a shamanic tradition, there's ancestral healing that the person who's the practitioner, the shamanic practitioner, would go and work with the ancestors, right? Or in hypnotherapy, there's like past life stuff that you can do, or hypnosis that you can do to get in touch with your ancestors. There's a variety of different ways of doing it. But just as the pandemic hit, I hooked up with an organization called Ancestral Medicine, which is founded by Daniel Four. And it's a structured approach to doing ancestral healing. And it is based in a lot of different traditions. He studied Yoruba and a lot of different kind of animistic traditions, right? And I've taught and worked for his organization now for quite a while as well. But the interesting thing about ancestral medicine, as I do it now, and I do use their framework, even though I'm not very much of a framework person, is I use it because it's really excellent. It really is structured, it's empowering. And one of the most amazing parts of it is we tap into the ancestors, our own ancestors, and we utilize their knowledge and their power. We ask them to come and do the healing. Because many times when people come and they want to do ancestral healing, sometimes they're feeling really like they have to heal their ancestors because their ancestors are all messed up. And it's like their job to heal the ancestors. But what we know in this framework is that we contact the ancestors, we begin to interface with the ancestors, and they come and do the healing. That even though the most recent ancestors that you know, like maybe probably most of us, the most we might know is 5 generations back. And most commonly, it's like 1 to 2 generations back that we know, right? But if we go far enough back into our ancestry, so like if you say, like 1,000 years back. I just wrote it down somewhere, but like 1,000 years is not that many generations, really. It's maybe more than 10. It's not that many. So if you go back that far, those souls from that time are now well healed. They're no longer attached to what's happened here in this time. They're not like your grandma or your auntie or your great grandma who suffered and are still in this framework. We believe that they still may not be healed. They may be hanging out and they may be still having their fingers in this pie that we live in the soup that we live in, right? So we go back and we find an ancestral guide, one that is well healed and vibrant, that can do the healing of the lineage. And in that process, you get to learn about the people that you came from, that you may not know anything about. Quite frequently, we kind of have an idea like a region where we're from. But then as we go deeper into this and begin to interface with the ancestral guide, this well-healed and vibrant ancestor of ours from a long time ago, they begin to tell us about our people. And this is super cool for people who don't know. Like me, I didn't know much at all about my ancestors. And now I do. Now I know a lot about my ancestors and I have a relationship with them. So ancestral healing is that it's healing the ancestors. It is also like healing the lineage that you come from. So we're born with a like what is passed down from our ancestors. And often what we're born with is not a healed state. We know that things generationally get passed down from one generation to the other. If your ancestors or your grandparents suffered trauma, often we suffer some of that same trauma in our bodies in a certain way, whether we're cognizant of it or not. So as we heal the ancestors, that comes down through the lineage to you and to your descendants. And I can use one good example in my own family. My mom and my aunt had never liked each other. My mom barely liked her grandma. And as I was in this training to do the ancestral healing, I did my mother's line. So we basically do mother's mother, mother's father, father's father, father's mother. Those are your four main lineages, right? So I did the healing of my mother's line. And about 3 months later, my mom came to me and she said, I just had the most amazing conversation with my mom. I've never been able to say these things that I was able to say to her. And she could listen to me. And I, at the moment, just went, oh, that's really cool. Good for you. Because she never really got along with her mom. And then later on, I was like, oh my goodness, I just did this thing like a couple months ago for this lineage. And then shortly after that, within a couple years, my mom and my aunt, her sister, became friends. And they had never been friends before. And I've seen this in other ways in people that are my clients that I've worked with. Whereas you begin to heal the lineage, like shifts happen and changes happen in your relationships with those who are still living, because they're also receiving the healing as we heal our ancestors. Is that close to what you were asking?
Yeah, oh, I think so. I think, does everybody have a better understanding now of what ancestral healing is? So, one of the things that might happen is the healing of inherited wounds,
Mm-hmm.
that they can help us heal something within us. Can you describe that a little bit? How that would work?
Well, that idea of us receiving unhealed genetics, essentially, or spiritual, I mean, the spirit, right? So if our family suffered, and many of us, our families suffered, however it is they came to this country. Many people, when they left their wherever they came from to come to the States and join this melting pot that we're in, there was a huge rift for most of our people because before that they lived usually in smaller communities where they knew what was expected of them. They were close to people that, I mean, and this happens over and over again in sessions. So I'm only saying it because I've experienced it a lot, right? That the that there was a rift that happened, or when people are conquered, or people, are forced to migrate, or whatever that is, where they lose the land that they come from, their people came from, right? So there's a huge rift that happens there in those people. And so if you look at our country, especially people of European descent, also you often don't really have a sense of who they are, where they came from before they were at this country, right? And our ancestors came from somewhere, right? And so the migration that happened when we came here and when we come to this country, we're essentially, ancestors will say, we didn't have any time. We had to like start making money and we had to keep running and we lost contact with our people and we didn't, they just were adrift in a lot of ways. So healing that in our ancestry brings it forward into our lives to where we have a sense of where we come from and we have a sense of where we are and those people who came before us. Instead of feeling uprooted, we feel rooted.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, often too, the kind of being the colon that we call them, the people who were the settlers, there was settlers and there was people that were already here. And so, or there was people in European and other places than the States, is what I mean to say, where people were conquered and where they were conquerors, right? So all of that plays out in our ancestry, and sometimes it doesn't really meld really well. There needs to be healing around those things too that have happened between
Mhm.
the different cultures clashing.
So a karma of sorts is created when they're birth.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of karma is always changing, so I wouldn't use the word, karma, but it is that we carry that, right? If
Mhm.
you were conquered and you had a child from that, and you are the child or the descendant of that child, that's in your DNA. That's how it plays out for you and comes down to you. So taking the time to heal those relationships, or to honor those relationships, or just to hear about them in the process of ancestral healing. Basically, what we do is we call on that ancestral guide. That ancestral guide will share with us and teach us and give us blessings from this lineage and tell us who these people were. And then it brings in all of the ancestors into a healing container. And in this container is where the wounds of the ancestors will be healed. And they will be healed by the ancestral guide. So we don't have to do it. We just ask that it is done. And sometimes it just happens because spirits can do things. And sometimes what needs to happen is we need to listen to the stories of those people who came before us, and the stories will come through. Sometimes they are not ready to be healed because they have to share something with their descendants first. And that's where it gets really beautiful and things come through.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, that's where it's really like I had one person whose family, all different branches of the lineage that she was looking at. I don't remember if it's mother's mother and mother's father or what, but they had been scattered. They were from the Middle East and all their people had just like been scattered. So when they brought them all together to heal, it took 3 months because every time we came back together, they told another story. They were like, we made a village and we just want to be together now. And so each time we come back to see if the ancestors are healed and at what point they are, we ask them. And every time we ask these ancestors, they were like, no, we're not ready. We come here, come to the fire. And so we'd come and, the client is telling me what they're getting from the ancestors. This is how it works. They are talking to the ancestors themselves and building their own relationship with their own people. And then the ancestors are telling them what's happening. And in this case, it was the ancestors themselves telling her stories about what their lives were like. And it went on for three months before they were ready, like, okay, we're ready to move on to the next thing. So in this format, what happens is this healing happens, and then you go to be ancestralized, meaning you become a well-healed ancestor that is moved on and is no longer harmed in any way or attached to any hurt that happened during life. They're almost godlike in some ways that they are just there to help. They are no longer suffering at all from what happened to them in their lifetime.
that is so cool. So the trauma that they experienced that was passed down to us is now
Yeah.
gone,
Yeah. It's
cleared.
essentially gone. Yeah. We
So it
bring
no
that
longer has
healing
it.
down through all the lineage. So there's a process, a little ceremony we do where we bring the healing down to each generation and to all their children and to all their offspring and to all their partners. We bring that healed lineage down through until it moves out into the descendants and future.
So that's a type of ritual or ceremony kind of thing, or
Yeah, it's part of the whole process. Yeah.
part of the
The
process.
whole thing is really a ceremony in some ways that we start with prayers, we end with prayers, we call in bigger powers to support us while we're doing the work, all through the whole thing.
It sounds like it could be pretty emotional. I
It
think.
can be, yeah.
I mean, I remember my experience going through this with my father's father's family, and I've known for generations. My grandmother was one who instilled the family line as much as she could, and she was one who would remember dates of people that I'd never heard of. So they were born here and they married this date, and that kind of thing. So I mean, it just kind of washed over me. I was never able to keep it, um, keep a track of it at all. But I have a niece who's done the genealogy, so thank you to her for that, which kind of gave me a clue. So I did have a sense of where my family had been in the past for several generations, and the stories that were told by the living that about how we got to be where we are. But I knew there was more than just the happy stories that went along with this. In my case, the ancestors in this line came from the Azores. And so the understanding we had was that there was um, active recruitment of the people who lived in the Azores by the British to fight as soldiers in the British wars in Africa. They would just pick them up on the way and take them in as soldiers. And just so to avoid that, the mothers would send their male sons on whaling ships that would go around the Horn and come to the Pacific Ocean. And that's where my story kind of settled into the where we are now. But that was like 5 generations ago. I'm the 5th generation to live here in California. So personal wounds that might be affiliated or traced back. Can you explore that a little bit? Is that
Well, in this framework, like we don't actually go looking for the wounds.
okay?
We allow them to come up as they will, because not everybody suffered in a way that they're still holding on to it. It's like
Gotcha.
it's such an interesting thing, because so if we put them into the healing container to be healed, most of the ancestors are like, cool, thank you very much. And we know that the ancestors themselves have the power to heal their descendants. So you're going, okay, we're healing from this ancestral guide, which is old, usually I call it ancient being, and between them and you, we ask them all to go into this healing container, and we ask that the ancestral guide will heal them, right? So a lot of them are like, it's like, great. And they just are like good to go as soon as they get the attention of that healing and the healing ancestor, the ancestral guide. They're fine. And then some of them will be left. And those are the ones that we end up talking with. And we're like, so what is it? What is, like, what do you need to heal? And sometimes they'll like, sometimes it's like the ancestor guide just, gives them whatever they need. And sometimes they will want to tell a story. And for instance, and often just like in hypnotherapy or shamanic work, it's like stuff you couldn't dream up. Like there was one time it was these 3 sisters that were there and they were not ready to go. And it turned out, and there was a little boy there with them. And it turned out when they were asked, they were like, we never had any children and we all wanted children. And they were like, well, can this little boy, and they were like, so we're here with this little boy and he's going to be our child now. But they needed to tell their descendant that they had never had children and they wanted to have children. And so they were dedicating themselves to this little boy who had also died in the lineage. And, like you couldn't make that up. And yeah, for sure, your whaling ancestors, could have suffered on a boat or a ship or something to that way that could definitely be the thing. But we just never know. Just like when you go on a shamanic journey or when you do hypnotherapy, you don't know what's going to happen. It just like shows up and happens. But yeah, anything that someone has, experienced. But it's often surprising. People will tell me, they'll come and they'll be like, I know there's a curse on this line. There's definitely a curse on this
Mm,
line.
mm.
And then we're like, by the time we get there, and I ask the ancestors, is there a curse on this line? They're like, nah, it's okay. We figured it out. We did it,
Yeah.
right? Because we've been doing the work and we've been paying attention to the ancestors. So the idea behind this is that in times past, basically before the Romans and the Christians and all that came, that we all took part in the death of our ancestors. We helped them to pass on as they passed on. We said prayers, we honored them, we did the things that were needed by our people, how whatever it was that we would do, we did those things. And so our ancestors were sent off from us, their descendants, in a way that was honoring who they were and allowing them to heal in whatever way needed to be healed. And then as the kind of organized religion came along in a different way, and took us our connection between our descendants and our ancestors and descendants was ruptured, because all of a sudden there's a priest that does it, or there's somebody else that puts themselves in the middle of it, and the people who've lost someone, they don't have the same rituals for themselves to honor the dead. So in this whole process also is that beginning to honor the dead, and to, like, our ancestors, like lighting a candle, having a bouquet of flowers, honoring them in some way, and giving up an offering that these people are still important and that we come from them. And the most beautiful part of it is that through this process, you get a whole team of people who love and care for you that you didn't know you had before that. They are there, but unless you start building that relationship, you don't know it. You don't know that it's there, and you don't know those people. Like, I know them. I know
Yeah.
who they were and what they were. And it's funny too, because I was just thinking about one of my aunts, my lineages, they called themselves travelers. They were totally Vikings, but they didn't call themselves Vikings. They were travelers, right? Like, so some of the things that we think, and then when you actually start relating to them, they're like, yeah, I don't know what that means. But
Mm-hmm.
we were travelers. We traveled.
Mm-hmm.
We went places. We did things. Yeah. And their favorite thing they asked me to do is to go stand up on a mountain in the wind or rain. Like, they just love the weather. They're like, okay, get out there. And they love it. Or sometimes some people will be like, eat the food that we used to eat. Like,
That's what
eat
mine
the
did.
food. Yeah,
Mhm.
eat the food, or go drink a beer, or winemakers wine, like, or bookkeepers do some numbers. I don't know. They'll ask for the funniest things, but each session we ask, like, what can we do? What kind of offering can we make to you?
Mhm. How can we honor you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do recall that the ancestor who was my guide in my experience was named João. That's a Portuguese name for John. And I could visualize him, and he helped me put some clothes on him and figured out what he looked like. And I I recall him kind of walking down a path, like a road away from me, leading me to follow him to go and meet other ancestors. And it was, Annie would get me to figure out, describe where we were, what it looked like, what kind of housing they had, what kind of clothing that they wore, what kind of food they ate, and that kind of thing. So, kind of really putting myself into their world. And so much of it it was like real life, because some of the same, I have to believe some of the recipes have been passed down because I, I grew up eating some of these foods that I was recalling, and maybe that was, informed, um, but we were sitting together in community, talking and telling stories around a campfire kind of situation, where there was a pot of food being, a stew or soup or something being cooked. And it just resonated so strongly with me. And they were all telling the stories about how their children had been sent off, and that ruptured the family's existence. It changed what they had been used to. So that's kind of where I was thinking that traumatic experience had been created.
Yeah.
Um, but are there other rituals or ceremonies that you do with this, or can you um, what kinds of methods do you use to get there?
Yeah. So in ancestral medicine, we try to, in this framework that I use, um, and sometimes people will come like, I just really want to talk to my grandma, and that can happen. But in this framework, we start out by honoring all that is in a kind of prayers and gratitude, and then we call on a power that is bigger than ourselves that we can ask for help. So, in this framework that I'm talking about, and it's not in a lot of spiritual work, is like the kind of perspective that we're like just people sized, and there are much bigger powers than us. So we learn to have the relationship with those powers that are greater than ourselves, right? So each of us have powers greater than ourselves. So if at any point, there's a point during these process that I ask, because sometimes our ancestors are all up in our business, like they're knocking on the door all the time, or they really want to work with you, and so they're so excited that you're doing this, or whatever it is. And we're sovereign to these bodies. They are ours. They're not our ancestors, and this space is ours. So we ask that those powers greater than ourselves clear the space and make a boundary around us so that nothing gets in here, so that our space is clear, which is really important because often people feel like it's something that they need to do or they owe their ancestors. They don't mean it in a bad way, but they feel like they're honoring their ancestors by letting their ancestors kind of get up in their business, right? So they're like, because they love their grandma or they love their auntie or they just want to be respectful, they're like, yeah, yeah. In some ways, you're inviting in these outside energies who are unhealed people. If they weren't, they wouldn't be in your stuff, right? So they wouldn't be influencing you in that way. There's a difference between influencing and supporting, right? So sometimes our ancestors are not healed and they're not in a good place and they're still coming through and still like get influencing us in ways. There's so many people that are carrying heavy stuff that is just not theirs. So this process can help with that. And in the very beginning of it, we're starting with getting those people out of your space and creating that space that you can do the work and that you're not being overly influenced and they have to stay back. And you're learning right off the bat that you have resources that you can call to create that space for you, that it's not just all on you and you are not alone in this, that we all, like this, the whole work that you're doing here, Mary, and all the things that most of you all are doing is about knowing that we're not alone and that we're not separate. And so the very first step is you're not alone, you're not separate, and there's powers bigger and stronger than you that you can call on if you need them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the basic first step. And then
Mm-hmm.
from
Yeah.
there, we move
Yeah.
forward into like reaching out to these ancestors. And in the process of healing them, we make more resources and more connectivity for ourselves in our day-to-day lives, that we have this other people. And it might not be every ancestor for everybody, but there are important ancestors that really care for you and that want to come through for you. So as we move forward into these sessions, we begin to learn to honor them. We begin to like build the relationships with individual beings and the big powers to the small powers to ourselves all along the way. And then that feeling of being a part of something and passing it on to those who come after me. Another important aspect of this that comes up quite often, and certainly did for me, um, was immediately when I talked to my one of the lineages, which my grandmother, who was getting older at that time and eventually died within a couple of years of me doing this, the first thing my ancestor said is, "Don't worry, we got her." And it was just like so touching to know that the ancestors were already lining up there. They were ready. They were going to be there for her. And also for my son, we had just gotten his diagnosis of leukemia right around then too. And they're like, "It's okay, we got him. We're here." And it's like so comforting to know that, that there are spirits waiting and that they're also watching out for the people that you love.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That it's not all about they're dead and forgotten, but they're still hanging in there
Yeah.
to work with you and for you. That's fantastic. Um, so we're talking about healing the wounds, but have you also found that ancestral gifts can be handed down as well?
You know what's interesting about it? Because some of the questions I ask are like, what are the gifts of these people?
Mm.
Right. And then they'll say, well, we were this and we were that, and then we did these specific things in our community. And often what those people did are also things that play out in the lives of these people I'm talking to in the moment. You know, there'll be and the lineages can be very different for sure. I just had a session with somebody a couple of days ago, and like all of what she was getting from was that they were leaders in the community. That's what they did. They connected and were leaders, and they were connect. Each time I asked, I kept getting the same answer. And then at the end, I'm like, so do you see that in your own family? And she like just runs down like, here's how they were all leaders in the community. And then another lineage, they were all business people. They were all people who were successful and could make money. And then she told me how all of those people could do that. One woman from the Philippines, she's like, their people were they made boats. And then another in her family were bookkeepers and always were into like accounting and education. And then this other family was, they were boat makers. And so when they made the healing container, it was a boat and everybody got on the boat and they had
Ah,
the ancestors on the boat. It was really sweet.
awesome.
So I think more than like, it's not receiving the gifts because they're always there. It's that you recognize them.
Recognize. Yeah.
Like the ancestors are saying, this is who we were. These are the people that we did, or the way that our people did a certain thing. And then you can see how they play out in the person. And sometimes they do. Sometimes people are like, no, I don't really know that. And then they start tuning into that aspect and
Mm.
see how it shows up later on. And they'll come back and go like, um, yeah, I just had a session. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. This woman she had a session with these, and she saw this like flower. It turned out like she had only known the first few generations. And so she was kind of super relating stuff back to when people came to this country. And so like there was a Christian minister or something that she was identifying as like one of her ancestors she thought was. And then I'm like, okay, but like let's go back farther than that. Let's like ask him to show you the people farther back, and if there's an ancestral guide even farther back. And then it went back a little bit farther, and it was like a Christian person, but the people who came before him were Celtic and Druids. And so then we went back to the Druids, and so then like for her, it was like revealing this whole other aspect of her that she didn't know. And she saw how the Druid and Christian people had to kind of like, the Christian people weren't quite forgiving. They weren't healed because they still had attitudes about the Druids. So then we had to go back to the Druids, and the Druids are like, yeah, that's not a thing. Like, so we go all the way back, and then she sees this yellow flower. And she's like, they were showing me this yellow flower. I don't know what it is. And then she went out after our session, because I always ask people, please write down everything you experience because more information will come to you. And she went out, and the yellow flower was there, like on her walk, just what she had seen that she didn't recognize in her session. And it turned out, was it yarrow? I don't think it was yarrow. It was something, but it was really specific to Druids. Like that it was like in their mythology and all this stuff. She looked it all up afterwards because she likes all the stories, and it was like all right there. And so now she didn't know this gift. She didn't know that this was a part of who she was. And now she can incorporate that into all that she is because it is actually a part of her own heritage.
That's absolutely cool.
Yes, it was a long email. I was just trying to remember all of it. But she's like, and then it was like this, and then it was like, and all these coincidences, like dominoes, just started all falling together about what her session was and how that flower related and how, it was super deep. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I recall trying to tie some of the experiences in through my session that my ancestors were showing me what they experienced, how they lived, and what they were doing was they were taking care of the community. They were taking care of each other by everybody contributing and participating together, making the food together, and that kind of thing. And it really um, awakened a recognition in me for the life that I led as a child growing up.
Mhm.
My family always went to these great big Portuguese festivals, and there was food being served to everyone. All the people were, the women were all making it together. The men were cooking the meat on, the grills and everything. They were in community. They were always um, serving each other, taking care of the greater good. And that seems to be something that I've inherited myself in taking care of the greater good, the larger. Uh, Most of you know my family is a large. I have a lot of siblings, and I'm the oldest, so I'm the one that takes care of them. It's just that kind of inherited kind of sense of responsibility that this is my task. I am to take care of these people. I am to um, make sure that all is copacetic, among the siblings and etc. So um,
Part of that for you, Mary, is um, doing it from a place of inherited lineage
mhm.
rather than doing it from a place of like just being a big sister and like this was an individual thing for you.
No, exactly.
When
Mhm.
you see it as that like lineage of people and like a passed down genetic or cultural thing that your people do, it makes it so much
Right.
more it's like
Beautiful thing.
yeah, it makes it
Yeah.
whole. It makes it whole.
Yeah. And I do, and that's, as I said, when working with Annie, I did come to that recognition, that realization that it wasn't just me in this place and time, in this generation, in this body that I'm in right now. It's me as a part of that entire line of, of well, in this case, humanity, but the spirit lives,
Yeah.
through that. It's fascinating. I was just really excited about that. Um, and I think I also recall that there was a sense of um, a need for forgiveness that um, needed to be passed back to the ancestors and to be received by the ancestors. So it was kind of a give and take kind of thing as well. Um, just something that was very emotional, very beautiful, spiritual in that um, experience. Um, so I definitely appreciated my time working with Annie on that. So I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's. You don't always have to know a lot about your ancestry.com line.
It's kind of better if you don't really,
Yeah.
because people, it's really hard for people to get over what they think they already know. So if you know, like your last three generations have been really shitty people or really traumatized people, sorry. But like then you think like, oh yeah, these people are not good. But really, it could be just recently they're not good. They could be really well healed and they were great, and then they had some real huge tragedy that just put them in a situation that they couldn't handle. And so like so if somebody we have like oh my mother's people are all like this and they're all good. No, actually everything is everywhere and everything lives within us, and each lineage has its good and bad people, and people are well healed and those who are not. Everything is in each of us. It's all there. We're all human. So when someone thinks they know all about their people, it's a lot harder because they can't get out of their story. We're always talking about trying to get people to get out of your story and what you think happened to your people because it doesn't leave a lot of room for the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to know where you come from and to honor those people and those places, but it probably Even if you know that all your people came from, I don't know, the Azores, all your people always came from the Azores, there could have been somebody traveling through, or there could have been some other influences, that
You've
have
been
their,
peeking at my family line.
yeah, well, my grandma's from the Azores. I'm only third generation
Mm,
from the Azores. And like there was a lot of people traveling through there and they traveled a lot, right? Because they're out in the ocean. So, and
mhm.
Angela, no, Angela's Italian. Yeah. Um, but like there's things that we don't know. And that's the exciting part is to be open to what we don't know.
Angela, you have a comment? You're muted.
Well, I'm just looking at my notes. I just am blown away because it's been 3 years, in April 2023, and I worked with Annie for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months. And for me, the first ancestor was my grandmother, my father's mother. But I don't want to get into the whole thing. All I want to say is for me, it was a very um, embodied experience, and I just remember being angry at my family for so long, and that anger just was just after that one session, that first session where we healed my father's mother. It just came off of me. It was amazing, and I'm not even gonna. It was just working with you, Annie, has been a privilege. And so, anyway, I just had to share that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, often the work that we're doing is perspective, right? It's like you're in your own hurt, and I'm not talking about you, Angela, specifically,
Yeah.
but I was thinking about this earlier, is the perspective that we get about like the harms and hurts that other people have gone through, those people who came before us, those people who hurt us, they actually also were hurt and they went through their own things and there are suffering that they experience. And so when you heal them, then what are you mad at? Or what do you, because they've been healed now. And so it's not there anymore.
So, do you, um, I don't recall this from my own because I didn't really have anyone that I felt had harmed me personally. But if there is a specific person in your lineage who has caused you harm in some way, you actually can work with that one person or that individual.
Yeah, they can
Mm-hmm.
come up because they're still hurt, right? Like
Mm,
those people that are still in our consciousness in a negative way, and those people that are still influencing us, it is because they're not healed,
mm-hmm.
right? If they
Mm-hmm.
were, they wouldn't, like my grandma, to bring my grandma into it. Like, I'm like, Grandma, I talk to dead people all the time. Why are you not showing up? She's been dead a few years. I'm like, come
Mm-hmm.
on, like, where are you? And then finally, she came to me in a meditation. She said, I'm everywhere. Like, you want to talk to me? Talk to me. I'm everywhere, but it takes a lot of effort for me to come and talk to you directly,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if somebody is still holding on or someone lived in a way that like that they just weren't able to heal from the harms that were done to them, and then they pass them on. Like this is that lineage thing that we're talking about. They pass
Right.
them on to those people and those people, those people. Those are the ones that need to be healed. And as we heal them, and we don't do it, we ask their ancestors to do it, the people older than them, to take care of them.
Mm.
So the problem is often we think that we have to heal them, that we've got to, and we've been trying most of our lives to find the answers to how to like let this go or how to heal the ancestors, somehow to like work it out with, a
But
recent
they're supposed to do
ancestor.
it
Yeah,
themselves.
that the ancestral guide does it. So it's like calling their mom. Or calling their mom's mom, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
those real old ones that have the power in the spirit world to like come through and
That's
bring
fascinating.
healing.
Yeah,
So, and we don't have to know what the healing is. We just ask that they do it.
yeah, yeah. And then they report back, okay, everybody done?
Yeah,
Everybody's healed?
right. We just keep checking in. Is that how are they doing? And the ancestors will tell us. And sometimes that includes them telling us the stories. And sometimes it's like they're gone, they're ready. What do you need? We want to be on your team.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes the getting in touch with someone who has um, a story that we've been told,
Mhm.
and it's it may or may not be as we've been told.
Yeah.
It may be there's another story to it, or more in depth to
Often,
it.
I
Yeah.
think often I had a woman that did, she was going back, not Croatia, no, someplace like that, Eastern Europe. She'd migrated here, but she was a child there, and she was taking her family back, and so she wanted to heal her specific goal was, I want to heal the male line of this family because it's a very male dominated culture, and before I go back, I want to do the healing on this lineage. And so we worked, and in this format, you start with the most healed lineage. So we do an assessment, we see which lineage is the most healed, unless there's something that we really need to deal with right away. But generally, you do all four lineages. It usually takes at least a couple sessions each lineage, and you go through, and sometimes a lot more, but you heal each lineage singularly, mother's mother, mother's father, father's father, father's mother. And so in her estimation, it was the male lineage that was the most damaged or most less healed, let's say. So we did, and we went along, we did it, and we got to the male lineage. This is the thing that she thought was the big problem. And so beautifully, it came through from the male ancestral guide on the father's lineage, that all those men were also damaged by the culture, by the patriarchy, that
Mm.
all of them felt like they had to be a certain way because of the culture and patriarchy, and that they had also all been harmed by that, and none of them wanted to be that way or to live that way. And it was just so beautiful because they were
Ooh,
such sweet
wow,
people, and they were like, oh yeah, we know we suffered in that too. Yeah. It
that's
was
what
beautiful.
awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know. A friend of mine once told me that there was an ancestor or recent ancestor in their line who had passed. They were both passed, and or the husband and wife had passed, and that there apparently was some um, uh, ill will between them that was unsettled, and that they were trying to describe to me how this person who had gone first had been um, abusive or something, and then the other person, the remaining, I guess, was the wife, um, it had a hidden secret that no one knew about, that she was a heavy drinker, and had hidden that in order to keep up the facade of the relationship. But everybody knew that the husband had been abusive. Nobody knew about the secret drinking,
Yeah.
and how one thing affects the other, and clearing all of that out can make such a big difference
Yeah.
on those remaining and the line going forward. It makes a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes left. Do you have anything else, Annie, you want to make sure we understand?
No, I think that's good. If you have any questions, you can always get in touch with me. I do the ancestral healing or just questions you have on my website. There's 15 minutes there for chatting, and there's also making appointments there.
Okay. And I know Kate has a question. If you do have a question, you can use the hands raised or just wave at me and I'll try and catch you. But Kate, go ahead with your question.
Okay, so it may sound a little strange. I have been known to ask strange questions. I believe that we have been in families together over many lifetimes, that our families tend to be the same families over and over and over again. So, as I'm listening to the healing element, is it possible that we actually participated in that lifetime where the wound became real? And that's a part of why we know it now. Because we were there. Because we participated. And isn't it also possible that in the time that we were not incarnate, that we were assisting our ancestors from behind the veil? So that the reciprocity of healing and acknowledgement of potential forgiveness and healing and growth and compassion can recycle through those lifetimes, and that's why it's so significant in this lifetime, because we've actually taken the time and the heart to address an experience that maybe we did participate in back then. Does that
This framework that I work in does not like go into the whole past life thing. It doesn't go into a lot of things. I mean, and I have been doing it long enough that some of it does interweave, right? Like I see how it could work, but it gets yes, to everything you said, yeah. And this bit, we just don't do it. Because it obviously, I mean, a lot of what you say, yeah, I can totally believe and get behind it. But in this framework, we try to keep it really clear about who the spirits are. And then people will be like, well, what do they look like? We'll talk a lot about what they look like and why are they showing up the way they are. And I'm like, they're spirits. They can show up any way they want to.
right?
Like,
Yeah, right.
like, and somebody's like, why are they showing up as a small child? I'm like, maybe it's easier for you to see them that way.
Right.
But yeah, I can see as I've done it long enough, the interweaves and the interplays that happen between past lives and the idea of reincarnating with the same people over and over again and how we've been doing that. And I have experienced that in myself as far as, doing past life stuff. So yeah, I believe all of that's there. But when I'm in a certain framework, I try to stay in that framework and not try to like big picture it, because the big picture gets wobbly after a while and it
Right.
spins off center.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I can
Thank you.
see
Answered
that.
that
Yep,
perfectly.
yep. But I also agree with you, Kate. I think that probably some of us have been in lives together, and in fact, I'm pretty sure of it. So,
Yeah.
experiencing that. So, any other questions? Does anyone? Kaya, unmute and give us your question.
Hi, this is a comment about what you just said, Kate. There's always been, there is still a schism or a separation between the past life, whatever, lineage, that may not be the right word, and the ancestral. And in my own mind, it doesn't have to be solved or healed right away, but it's always been there. And that would be a question. It's always in the back of my head. Well, what about, you
Something to
know,
explore. Mhm.
what was that?
Something to explore. Yeah.
Yeah. And Annie, I didn't know. I just did a bit of ancestral work with you. And my thought, or at least my understanding, which was not huge or anything like that, was that I had to well, no, okay, I just said something, didn't I? I had to. Um, Working with my father's line, and I'm still there. I still don't, but that they had to be healed before I could move on to the next lineage. That is my father's mother's lineage. Are you saying that that isn't the way it works?
That is the way it works generally. Doesn't
Oh,
have to,
so I
but
thought you were supposed,
again, it gets muddied when you start dealing with too many lineages at one time within this framework.
yeah.
But this is just a framework, like this is just a way that really works, that I know really works and is very systematic. But you can work with any lineage you want to.
Well, okay, so I don't know what's going on in that sense, and there's been a ton of stuff going on in my life.
Yeah.
But in any case, the one great gift I felt was these rocks that were found over a period of time. This is after we worked together and just at the end of my block, and they were all the same kind of rock. I don't know where they came from. And beautiful old plain ancient rocks that was like the ancestors gifted me and said this is a clue and it's a gift and they're on my altar, you know.
Ooh.
It's just, yeah, oh, amazing, just amazing. I still don't know who those healed ancestors are, but it's been very interesting to look at the, Balkans and Yugoslavian and how mysterious that whole group of people is, whether or not it's just Wikipedia. So I've been sort of doing this for about, what, 2 years, probably, since we worked together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people it zips right along, and some people it grows and it takes a while, and people go away and they come back and they just learn something different or something new, or the ancestors come in and we're talking about the spirit world. There's a lot that is just working its way through our lives until in the way that it needs to.
Hmm.
There's
Mhm.
not a right or a wrong way. There's just how it shows up and what's comfortable for us.
This
Mhm.
is just very timely. So thank you.
Mm.
Thank
Very
you.
timely.
Great. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Annie, very much for your time. And again, a big congratulations on being a great grandma again for the
Thank
first
you.
time. First time.
First time grandma, not great grandma.
Oh,
I had
I'm
this
sorry.
little
You
girl.
are a great grandma.
I am a great grandma. I had a little Haitian girl staying here, a Haitian family that's my adopted family, but I hadn't seen them for a long time because anyway, they live in Denver now. And they were here this weekend. And I said to this 6-year-old, I said, I'm going to invite my mom here for dinner with us. And she's like, You have a mom? I said, Yeah, I have a mom. And she says, But you're old. And I said, Yeah, I know I'm old. She said, No, 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 no. You are old, 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 Annie. How do you? So I'm not a great grandmother yet. I'm just a grandmother.
Grandma.
But I'm definitely
I
old,
better
old,
watch.
old. 3 old.
But your cutie is a cutie, that's for sure. Yeah, he's a
Thank you
doll.
very much for having me, Mary. I appreciate it.
Certainly. And I
Thanks for
think
you guys for showing up.
thank you all as well. And with that, I look forward to next month. Holly is
Oh,
going to be my guest.
great.
Holly Holmes Meredith. Holly
Mhm.
Meredith
That's it. No, you
Holmes,
said it right.
Holmes Meredith.
Mhm.
And we're going to talk about spiritual emergence. So think about that. And
Thank
I
you.
look forward to seeing you all then again. So until then, be well.
Be well.
Thank you.